Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. It is November 12th, and I cannot believe how fast the year has gone. We're like literally 40 something days away from Christmas, and I am super excited today to have a very special guest. And just like I mentioned in my video, this lady is a powerhouse, boots on the ground, full 360. She knows construction from the job site to the contracts. And I am very happy to have Miss Karla from SosheBuilds. So, Karla, can you give the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so again, I'm Karla Talisse. I'm the founder of SosheBuilds. We focus on supporting contractors and emerging contractors who want to get into public works or government contracting. And I would say my background really connects to our mission. So I started as an estimator, I worked as a project manager, and then I worked as a consultant as well as an owner's rep. So when you think of multifamily, I worked in custom homes and I worked in commercial construction. The one thing that makes us different as far as being a consultant in this field of government contracting is we know the pain that contractors go through. I mean, I've seen it on every side, the estimating side, the managing of the project, the administrative work, as well as just having a presence online. So the marketing side of things. And that's what makes us so successful at helping contractors. It's knowing how the business runs. And I think a lot of the times that's hard to teach someone if they haven't lived it. So yeah, that's a little bit about us and why we do what we do.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, when we first connected, I was very astonished about how much experience you have, but just being, very well rounded. So let's go ahead and dive into what you know best, which is government contracts.
Okay, so this is really tailored to a beginning contractor or subcontractor. We work with small to medium size, but this I really wanted to be like an entry level understanding of if you've never heard of it, you've seen it online, but you don't even know where to start. I wanted to give you a breakdown on what's stopping contractors and subcontractors from going after these contracts and just a clear path on how to get there. So being small doesn't mean thinking small. So your company really is your legacy. Large firms win because they understand systems, not because they do better work. With saying that is, as soon as you understand how to navigate government contracting and working with public agencies, you can compete. It really just comes down to the confusion that a lot of contractors have. They don't know the process. So that's something we'll go over briefly as well. And so there are a lot of local agencies that want to work with small contractors. That's something that's really not well known. Contractors go after, I would say, larger contracts that aren't really specific for small businesses, women-owned businesses, or disabled veteran-owned businesses. Almost every local agency provides certain projects that are only specifically for those certifications. And why does that matter? You're not competing against multi-million dollar companies, and you're also, I would say on average, what I've seen when a contractor bids on an SBE project, maybe like 4 contractors, sometimes I've seen 2. So when you think 2, you basically have a 50-50 chance of winning this contract. And that's why it's so important to get certified. But again, you have the support of these local agencies wanting to work with small contractors. And overall, when you're prepared, you're not competing, you're positioning. And so what that means is when you're prepared and you understand how the system works, you don't have to compete against these large firms. Again, you're a small business, you know what you're doing, and you're competing against other small businesses. And I think that takes the pressure away, and as well as it brings optimism to the contractor or the subcontractor that you're not putting in all this time that's not going anywhere. Your odds are a lot higher. And so if we have any questions on that, you can also leave them in the chat. But just moving on to what the foundations of getting into doing work with a local agency or with local, for example, with the state. Normally, you want to get your certification. With certification, what I see is the application can get a bit confusing. That's kind of where we step in and we can help you with navigating the certification process. But the typical certifications, and again, there's a lot more than these, but these are the typical ones that people go after, which is a disabled veteran-owned business, a minority-owned business, women-owned business, disabled small business enterprise as well. These are the main ones that the agencies go after as far as supporting businesses that fit into these categories. Occasionally, it'll be like a local owned small business. They have different certifications, matters which agencies. But again, this is why it's so important is they have small business set asides and again, specific projects that are only for anybody that falls into the certification that increases your odds of winning these projects. And then I know Rocio can go more into bonding on maybe like a different talk, but for sure, bonding is always needed. I've only seen on a few housing projects where bonding wasn't required and it was just an insurance requirement, but I would say that's really only 10% of the time. So I always just kind of go over it really briefly. A bid bond just means you're qualified, a performance bond means you'll complete the job, and a payment bond means everyone's going to get paid. That's something that it's a process to get qualified. It's some documentation that goes into it. But again, we're here to support you and I would say build confidence in the contractor. Normally, I'll ask about your business, how long you've been in business, what your cash flow is looking like, and I'll kind of give you the right guidance to connect you with the right insurance brokers that either work with small contractors, with a medium-sized contractor, or large. So again, you don't have to just go blindly. I think what I've seen is contractors will call like a larger insurance agency or surety company and they don't work with small businesses. So they'll say, like, we can't really help you right off the bat. And I think that's where contractors turn away and they're like, oh, I don't think I can get into doing work with agencies. And it's just you called the wrong person. So again, if you have any questions on that, on working specifically with, insurance brokers or sureties that work with small businesses, we make that connection for you. The next one is capital. Capital isn't always needed. I've worked with contractors that either get capital, again, with it's just going through a bank, or you work with CDFI partners. And it really matters how large the project is. I've seen contractors go after $250,000 to $500,000 projects and they don't really need the capital. They're able to fund their project based off of their private work going on as well. They just have enough experience to have, for example, like a business account where they have savings where, hey, if you're pushed back 2 weeks for payment, it's not going to crumble your business. But if you don't feel confident in that way, we also connect you with CDFI partners that specifically work with small businesses that will basically create an account and they manage it. It's third party funds administrator, but we can also go through that on a private call, and that just helps secure your business to not go under, even if you're delayed payment 2 3 weeks. And you just never know. I'm sure anybody that works in construction, you all know that you might get paid on time and occasionally you're paid late. Our goal is to make sure that you're successful in this space, and that's why we want to make sure that we review your company and fit you with the right CDFI partners in case you do need that support. And then lastly, just know your capacity. Just if this is new, your bond line is, think of it like a credit line. You cannot bid after projects that are bigger than that bonding line. And so a lot of the times before people come to me, contractors, they're looking at projects that are in the millions, 2 millions, and I basically tell them, you've been looking at projects that you can't even bid. So it's a lot of time wasted. You definitely, for example, most contractors I work with are from like $750,000 to $800,000. So I'm like, let me find some projects that fit into that scope of work and into that capacity. And then at least that you're looking through it, you're putting time into it, you understand that the project you're looking at, you're not wasting your time on it. So that's another confusion that, again, mainly subcontractors don't understand is you can't go after jobs that your bond line doesn't cover. So that's your cap. So I know Rocio kind of helps contractors, mid-sized contractors, but you always want to continuously do a great job on that project, because once you finish a project and again you've completed it well, you have letters of recommendation, you can go back to the surety company, show and build trust, and they can always increase your bond line. So again, starting small is never a bad thing because you can grow from there.
Yes, and you hit such an important point on that because I think that's actually derails people because people assume, oh yeah, it's a $2 million project. I'm gonna gross profit this. Like, yes, for someone that might be in the business 10 plus years, maybe 5 years, but if you're just starting and you don't even know, your bond capacity, but it's really like if you're trying to bite too much of the pie. And it's not the same thing, especially I've seen this a lot when a contractor comes from the residential side to the public side, two completely different worlds. And then I see we have a question from Eric Castaneda. I got a small business owner certification on May 2024. Do I have to renew it?
If you did it through the state, you do have to renew it every year. To renew it, it's again a free cost. The only time that you put in is you need to have your taxes done and already, for example, a PDF copy saved on your computer. That's a delay. Some people they don't do their taxes until later into the year. So if you don't have the available, you cannot update your certification because again, you have to fall under a certain threshold to still be considered an SBE, and you just check that to make sure you're not making, I don't know, $100 million a year because you're not considered a small business at that point.
Thank you. And Josh said, crazy people bid projects thinking because they can that they should. Yes, 100% right, Josh. And I think it's because sometimes the residential guys they're used to making 2 million, 1 million on the residential private, which is completely different from the public world. So I think they just get used to these larger contracts on this side, and then they think it's the same thing on the public side.
And yeah, that's true. That's a big thing that we do is we strategize. Again, our goal is to make sure you don't fail. And the difference with public projects is when you fail the first time, you're probably not going to get a second chance. In private, for example, you might ruin your reputation a bit, but maybe you'll find a client that doesn't know about you and they'll use you. In the private world, it's very hard to to really just hide your reputation, and also because it's on your bond line. Once that agency looks at it, for example, if you have a failed bond, they'll be able to see, oh, they failed their last project, do we really want to give them this project? And so that's exactly why we strategize, hey, maybe your company is worth a few million dollars, but you shouldn't start that high. You should start smaller. So you build your confidence, you understand the documentation, you understand the tracking, again, from the accounting side of it. You want to be successful. And I think people are overly optimistic and they think, well, I can do it. I know I can do it. But I say, why risk it when you can start smaller? And normally, if you know any contractors in the space, they're not only doing public projects, they're doing private. So you have enough cash flow going on in your private projects to not risk your entire company doing public work that you can't afford to do. And when I say afford, in all ways, it's your time, the management of the project, as well as understanding the complicated documentation that goes with it. If it's your first time, you need to adjust so you can learn the system and learn the process. I would say that's the hardest adjustment contractors have from private to public work.
Yes, and we have another question from Joe Murphy. What dollar amount makes you a small business?
Yeah, so I work with contractors from here to Florida to New York. It really matters based on the state you're in. In California, last I checked, it was about under 7 million. You're still considered a small business. In other states, it varies. Again, you just have to let me know what state you're in, and we can always look it up for you and let you know.
Then Josh says, for that amount of money, we'll figure it out. Famous last words.
Agreed. Okay, so I'll go to the next slide if we don't have any more questions. Another thing that contractors and subcontractors are a bit confused are RFPs, RFQs, and contracts. So even if you wanted to go after this call and type in your local agency, every agency's website is so old and it's just like outdated. It's very confusing to navigate. And not only that, when you open up these RFPs and RFQs, it's 200 pages. And I always have contractors say, oh, yeah, I tried to look at it once and I just gave up. I didn't want to do it. And I'm like, we're in 2025. Like, let's get with the program. You need to make sure you have some system like Adobe, or there's a ton of free ones that you can just use on like an online app. You need to filter through these 200 pages. And I really just say start with look up the word scope, look at the scope of work. Is that something you want to do? Next, do you even qualify for this? So you might see that the project is only worth $500,000 and you need to look at the insurance requirements too, right? Because sometimes they have insane insurance requirements that don't even make sense. And sometimes it's an error. Sometimes that's just what they want. But you have to look at your insurance that you currently have. Do I even meet all these requirements? Again, the bonding, you need to ask yourself, do I meet the bonding requirements? A lot of the times there's certain certifications that you need. I would say when I worked with a contractor that was doing housing, he needed an abatement certification. He didn't have that. We had a sub that was willing to put himself up as the responsible person for that abatement, and they were able to use his certification. So you need to make sure that all the requirements fit what you can do. And if you can't, then move on. You're wasting time reading 200 pages of something you can't even bid. And so a lot of questions that I get after the fact, let's just say you're awarded the contract. What should I look for in the contract? I would say a lot of these are the same that you should be looking in construction in general, but I listed them here. Make sure that the payment terms and the retention is something that you agree with. The liquidated damages is something that you're aware of. The scope of work on the contract matches what originally was on the RFP and the RFQ, because I can't tell you how many times it's changed and they forget to tell the contractor, and the contractor still signs it for, doesn't account that for their cost, and now it's too late. You already signed the contract. Make sure that the change order process is listed very clearly. If you work in construction, we all know change orders are a headache, and it's very hard to get them approved once you're like so far in. So you want to make sure that the change order process is something that you and your team agree on and something that you're able to do, as well as they have their own separate payment terms on the change order. So make sure you agree with that as well. There are schedule requirements and penalties. Again, you need to look at your workload for if this project's 6 months, you need to look at the next 6 months in your private work and your public work, and make sure that you can meet the schedule requirements. And then again, we were talking about the insurance and the indemnification. You want to make sure that you agree with that. And contractors always ask me, well, what if I don't? This is a great time to negotiate. There are a lot of the times where contractors will just not sign and walk away from the contract, not knowing that they can negotiate. And I'm not saying that everything that you ask for, you're going to get, but you can have this conversation with them and you can negotiate certain terms, because ultimately they want to get this project done. And if they really think that you're going to get it done well, they're willing to work with you. And that's where it connects back to like marketing, having a strong capability statement, having a strong presence online. If they don't know the work that you've completed, they don't really know what to work off of besides your word. So that's a different part of, I wouldn't really consider it's a requirement in public works, but it does help your case when you're negotiating your terms. So I would say negotiation and presence online, and knowing your quality and your reputation, it kind of connects. So I always like to mention that, because I know it takes time and effort to build that online, but it will help you in the negotiation process. So look at it as like an investment in a different way.
Yeah, and then let me ask you, is that something you help out with? Do you know, when you're going through the contract and you're seeing things that are like, okay, you don't need this, or you should work, work this out. Is that advice that you give?
Yeah, so that's more of us. It's not so much a strategy call, but we get to a point where contractors have been doing this over and over, and sometimes they're just busy and they ask us, hey, we have this contract, we need to sign it. Can you highlight things, leave notes on it for us to kind of evaluate? Again, it's not like a service that we do so many times, because I feel like contractors, after the first or second time, they know how to do it themselves. But if it's something that you just feel very unfamiliar from, even from the private work that you're doing, it's always nice where when someone teaches you how to like review these terms and like what's out there, what's like a better way of doing business with these public agencies, because we've done it before with so many contractors. It's nice to have that, I would say, that opinion. You don't have to completely agree with us. That's one thing some contractors get scared. They're like asking us questions like, oh, what if they don't agree with what we want and they think it's like too much of an ask? We don't really care. We're gonna just prepare you to have these conversations with agencies, because agencies, as you know, they're very rigid. So we'll set it up for you where um, you have a great presentation on why you should change these terms for you as a contractor. So that is a service, but I would say it's more far down once we've been working together for some time.
You got it.
And then, so again, I really wanted to build this presentation specifically for small businesses. And I know it gets very confusing. There's so much information out there. So if you just screenshotted this is literally what it takes to do business with local agencies. If you didn't want to even have any consultant help you and you really wanted to go on your own and do this, it's really all about getting certified. You have to get bonded. You need to register with local agencies to use their websites. You need to build an administrative playbook. When I say that, it's you need to have people on your team that have great administrative skills to make sure that you're successful in this space, because it's so much documentation. And then start with smaller bids and grow strategically. We just talked about that. Even if you're a multi-million dollar contractor, I wouldn't recommend to start going after multi-million dollar projects in public works. You need to try a smaller one, get used to the documentation, the process, and then build from there. Your goal is to grow strategically and safely. You don't want to just jump into it, fail, and then you're kind of done. So that's something that we kind of do and help strategize the projects you go after. And really, if you can do all of these things, this is going to move you from hoping to do work with public agencies to actually winning. So again, we like to provide this because this is literally the framework. This is what you need to do work with public agencies. And I love bringing this slide in because contractors like, I thought it was way more complicated than that. I'm like, it's really not. The documentation can be a bit more daunting, and we help with that as well. But this is the framework. If you can do this, then go after some public agency jobs.
Oh, that's why I brought you in because you make it seem so easy.
And so we're going to move to the next slide. And again, if today's information applies to you and you want support implementing it, you can always DM us on Instagram or DM us on LinkedIn, and we'll give you the list of or the pathway. A lot of contractors want to know, so what does this look like? I always like to be realistic. So I have some contractors who they're not in the field so much. So I would say 2 to 3 sessions, they're ready to go after a contract with whether it's a public agency or they're looking at a state project. I have a lot of other contractors that are more subcontractors. They're very involved in the field. So they're working from 6 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They don't have as much time and dedication to, I would say, learning and really being intact in these meetings. So I would say for them, it's about 5 calls and then they finally get it. But I think that really just comes down to time, urgency, where your attention is. But realistically, I recommend best to send, if let's just say you're the CEO of the company. If you don't have the time, send your project manager that has the time because they're able to reteach you what I'm teaching you later. But if you're running the entire company, you're handling HR, payroll, you're in the field, I mean, by the time we meet, the information isn't really sticking. So it almost seems harder than it is. So we always recommend, hey, you want to be on the call, but maybe just throw in your project manager because if you miss something, at least they're on the call. So that's just advice that I give just because I see it time and time again where it takes a bit longer to learn how to do it just because your focus isn't fully in it. And then this is an opportunity, I would say in the last couple of months, we had enough contractors that went up to a nonprofit. They sponsored their education. And so we were able to come in and teach 10 contractors at one time. And so I do work with small businesses, and I know not everyone has the capacity to pay for one-on-one consulting. And so I would say the next option on that is if this is something you're really interested in doing and you know enough subs, enough other contractors. Again, we work with architects and engineers too, but anyone who wants to get into working with public agencies, if you have a group and you know a nonprofit out there or an agency that wants this type of assistance, they normally will sponsor a group anywhere from 10 to 50 contractors, and they'll work with us to present this information to you in a long, for example, we had like a 5-hour training before. So I always like to put this out there because I get it. Not everyone has the time and the money to dedicate for consulting, but this is an option that's out there. It's more working with your community on this.
I got a question from Instagram saying, "Will you go down to Riverside? I guess maybe like will you drive to Riverside for a group?"
Yeah, if you're, for example, if it's a partner or an agency or a nonprofit, we're open to working anywhere in Southern California. We also do virtual. It really just comes down to that nonprofit or agency knowing their audience. For example, I've done work in LA. No one wants to drive in traffic in LA. It's so bad. So their best outcome is virtual. Anything in Orange County, there's not a lot of traffic here. In person, it provides the most, I would say the most excitement and education in person. So it really is just per agency, per nonprofit. I'm sure they throw enough events to kind of read the room. So again, it's not something that I would personally pick. It's something that the agency or the nonprofit picks.
Okay.
And then, so yeah, this is just me closing. I mean, really, the reality is contractors and subs know how to build. Our role at SosheBuilds is to help you get into rooms that make the decisions and have the funding for these public projects. We help build capacity, opportunity, and access so small contractors can participate fully in these communities that they help create. That's something that we're really passionate about. Some part in the story that I didn't really share is my father had a contracting business. I helped him do invoices from when I was really young, maybe like 12 years old. I'm on a computer typing in these numbers. He wasn't tech savvy. So I'm really connected to I'm really connected to the process because I get that if I change a subcontractor or contractor's life, it affects their families. And I am directly connected to a family who my father didn't have the assistance. And I felt that his company could have grown a lot quicker if he had the assistance that we provide. So I always like to mention that because we're not just consultants and we're just in construction. We understand that side of things too, where everyone's working to help their family ultimately. So we're really passionate about being able to do that for them as well. And so
Yeah,
if you
we really know the definition of small business and family.
exactly, we know the impact. We know the impact that it takes, and that's also why we're here to talk it through at all levels. We understand if this is something so new to you that it seems intimidating because again, I've seen it with my own father. It is intimidating. I mean, maybe that's why he was never able to ask for the help because he didn't know what to ask, right? So yeah, I like to always mention that. And we just have our handles here. If you either reach out to us on LinkedIn or Instagram, or sometimes some people will reach out directly on our website. We have like an active chat on there. You can ask us any questions and we'll get back to you as well.
Awesome. Well, we still have some time, guys. If you guys want to ask any questions, ask them now. We have Karla. Joe says, awesome material. Thank you for sharing. And then we got Nathan over here saying, awesome. Thank you for viewing, Nathan. Yeah, you guys. Karla is on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Is there any other platform besides your website that you're on?
Just so on Instagram, so it's at SosheBuilds. On LinkedIn, we have a SosheBuilds page, but I'm more active on my personal, so it's under Karla Talisse with a K. And then we are active on our website where we're constantly checking in on all our chats as well.
Nice. Any advice that you would give a small business? I mean, maybe a residential guy that's thinking about moving over to the public sector, because as you know, um, right now the private side there's not much new buildings. Especially if you've been doing residential and apartments and multi-unit. Thank you, Will, for watching. I'm seeing that from the residential side that things are slowing down.
Yeah, I love that question. So I started my career building custom homes in San Diego and La Jolla. And so I've seen directly making that transition going into public works and commercial. And I feel like the missing piece that contractors don't have is that administrative support. There are people that are just really great at doing the accounting side or they're great at project management. But when it comes to public works, you need somebody that understands the agency side because there's a lot of terminology and documentation that just seems excessive. But the reality is you need to complete it. And it's not that it's hard, you just need to have somebody that's tracking that. And normally, what I see is project managers are so focused on the project that it almost is an annoyance. So you don't want them to be doing that documentation. And then the people doing the accounting, it's the scope of works, the change orders, all of that is technically on there. And they don't want to read that. So you need somebody that's specifically paid to do all your public administrative work. That's the reality. If you don't have that, it's going to be such a roller coaster because doing work with public agencies isn't hard. It's just a lot of excessive documentation. So, for example, let's say the change order got approved. I've seen there are 3 additional documents that need to be signed because that change order was approved. And sometimes it sits in the contractor's inbox for weeks just because they didn't notice it was 3 different emails and there's not one person tracking it. And then that puts them behind. So, I would say if you're going to make the transition, I would hire somebody, train them. Just really have them start them with reading RFPs and RFQs because they'll know what to look out for, they'll know their terminology, and then do work with public works. Because if you go in thinking you're going to do everything or your project manager is going to do everything, you're going to get quickly discouraged, because if you think you do a lot of paperwork now, you're going to do a lot of paperwork later. And then I like answering the question because the question I get once I say that, they're like, well, then what's the trade-off? The trade-off is, I would say, the markup that you can do on these public projects tend to be greater than your private work. So you end up being able to pay that administrative worker that you have, and it's not going to put a burden on your business. And that's because when you're competing for all the SBE projects, it's it's not so competitive. You're competing against maybe 3, 4 people, so they're marking it up as well to account for whoever their admin is doing whoever the admin that's doing all that work is for. So I've seen some contractors mark it up pretty crazy and they still win. And that's something you don't really hear in private because you don't want to do that. You look terrible if you do that. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, but in a funny way, in public works you can get away with it. if you're lucky enough to not compete against such a big pool, because your number's still so competitive because everyone's adding in this extra cushion into their numbers as well.
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that question, but we have a question right here from Eric. Is this a month-to-month service you provide, and how much?
So we do some consulting calls where it's either you can schedule it based on how you want it scheduled. Some contractors, I meet them once a week. Others, it's like let's meet every 2 weeks. That's the type of time they have. That's not, I wouldn't consider that a monthly service. It's like paid for service. And then we do have some retainer contractors, but I would say none of the retainer contractors are small contractors, are normally medium because we do a lot of their documentation. They're so busy that they can't handle the documentation, so they have us take it on. With smaller contractors, it's more they do like a as service payment based on their needs and their time, because you don't have the work yet, so you don't need all the assistance. You just more need strategy. So I would really just start with a strategy call. And if you DM us, we can give you the price for a small business. We kind of give them a better price as far as you just have to let us, know your website, your typical revenue, and we'll see if you fall under the category for small business, so we can help you in a different way.
Nice. All right, so back to the question about the markup. So I want to talk about this because I actually hear the opposite when they're maybe because they're starting out, so they really don't know how to do it. But the complaint that I get is, I went to the public side thinking, there's a lot of work on the public side, but the markups, like they're like, I'm getting less money than I was on the private side, and now I'm paying all this money to the union, prevailing wages, so forth. So when you talk about markups, can you go into a little more details? Because obviously everybody wants to know how to make more money.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I worked with an estimator that was specifically teaching in the public sector, and the way that he really broke it down was you need to make sure that all the additional costs that you're doing in public works, for example, your bond, you need to make sure that you have that in your estimate. A lot of contractors that come from residential and go to public, they don't account for all the additional costs. So then they start losing money because they didn't account it in the beginning. And then you won the project, yeah, because you're the lowest. But unfortunately, you didn't account for all these excessive costs that you typically don't need in private. And when you're able to do, and so when you do that, one, you're protecting yourself, which is important, but two, your competitors who are experienced in this are doing that too. So I think contractors overthink it. They think, oh, I want to be the lowest, I want to win the job. No, it's like protect yourself first. Get with an estimator at least 1 or 2 times. Just like there's consultants that only do public projects, they're in their estimators. They will lay out, I would say, an Excel sheet that includes all these line items. For example, your bond, your administrative worker, whoever's doing your public projects documentation, and then they're still marking up the project to be competitive. And I think the only contractors I've seen lose money is the ones that go into it not accounting all these additional costs. And I get it, that's confusing. That's why we're here. We're here to let you know which line items you typically don't see on the private side that you'll see on the public. And so when you're including what you need for the project and then you're marking it up, you'll make money. But for example, if you marked it up and then you didn't include all these additional costs, I mean, you're either going to break even or you're losing money at that point. So I think the estimating part is different, and at least have a few sessions with an estimator that does public projects so you can get comfortable, and they send you their templates. And that's a service that most of my contractors use one time, and they're able to keep that template as valid, I would say, for like 4 or 5 years. After that, you need to kind of update it based on the changes in this public sector. I'm sure there's additional things that people are always charging you for more things, right? But something I recommend, and that's something that we don't do. We're not in-house estimators, but we can always connect you with the right person.
Yeah, and that's something that you're familiar with, right? You have a lot of experience with project management and estimating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I get the daunting part and how you can miss some line items, but it's not so difficult. It's, if somebody goes over it with you once and they set up this template for you, you're pretty set. It's not gonna, there's not these surprising costs that are gonna come up. But it really comes down to, again, I know you work on the bonding and the insurance side. That can get kind of expensive based on what the project is. So you need to make sure that you're accounting that. You don't want that just to be like, oh, I'm gonna send in this estimate and I didn't account for those costs. I would say that's really a huge part that at least none of our contractors have done, but I've seen it happen. And then they just stop doing public works because they broke even, and they're like, well, what am I doing all this documentation for? I'm not making any money. It becomes discouraging. So again, before you go into public works, just make sure that you're covering your estimating. So you understand public projects on estimating side. You understand documentation. You need to have somebody trained in documentation. And then lastly, you need to make sure that you are tracking more than you were before, because agencies are going to ask you for like a resume, and I think a lot of contractors, they never take pictures of their projects, they never talk about their wins, they never talk about what their team did best, and that makes a big difference to an agency, because again, they're going to build trust with you. They're going to know how you either overcame an obstacle in the past, or how you just either complete the project well. But we all know that that never happens smoothly.
Yeah, no, you nailed it right there. I mean, like I always tell people, like construction, there's always going to be problems. There's always problems. It's
Yeah.
just like that's what makes a contractor really skilled in their craft, right? Because the plans are not plans are never what the architect never has puts it in there exactly what it needs to be done, and as soon as the general contractor gets their hand on those plans, it's all about time and money. They just want, all right, we want the speed, get it done. And another issue that I see or complaint that I sometimes get is that people don't get paid on time, or they don't get paid because they didn't fill out the paperwork correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly why, again, we recommend, if you need the capital to do it, because you don't, everything is a risk, because everything's tracked meticulously by the agencies, that you need to account for the worst. That, hey, your payment terms say you're going to get paid every 6 weeks, but hey, what if you don't get paid till the 8th or the 9th? And that's why you want that capital, hey, in case that happens. But again, I like to speak from experience. I've only ever seen that happen once, and that was a contractor that was building for a university. They were paid maybe 2 months late. And that's a lot. That's really pushing it. I mean, they had a bunch of subs working underneath them. That was a general B contractor. And that was extremely stressful. But because he had a CDFI partner working with him, he was able to cover all those costs. But we always think, what if he didn't? What if he didn't plan that way from the beginning? So with universities, I would say it's a bit different, because the funding, again, we can go over that on a different call, but the fundings ran a little bit differently, and it needs to get approved by different people, especially if it's like a change order. And the universities take a while to come to a conclusion, if whether they agree or not. And so that will push your payment further and further out.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. All right. Well, you guys have any questions or concerns? Any questions, or you want to reach out to Miss Karla for her service? You guys can reach her out on her LinkedIn. She is tagged on my post. And then if you guys follow me on Instagram, you guys can also follow her page. If not, I will copy and paste her Instagram in this event, and you guys can follow her.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone. I mean, I had a lot of fun, and I know me and Rocio will probably continue to do something in the future. So if we didn't cover anything
Yes.
today, let us know.
I think it would be good too if there's any like topics, I don't know, if, you guys want to make it about change or well, we can't get too in depth, but a topic, you have like financing, different things, and I'm glad that your company has offers that service where you could do group events, because I'm associated with a lot of different associations and chamber of commerce, so I know they're always looking for people like yourself to provide education to their members.
Yeah, and that's something we look forward, and we actually really enjoy doing it, because contractors will start asking questions that other contractors are like, hey, I never thought about that. And I think it just provides a more dynamic, like educational space for learning, because everyone has a different experience as a contractor, and people are
Mhm.
thinking of different things at different times.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I look forward to doing something again soon.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you. And we will see you guys on the next one. Bye.